There is something about February 28th, 2026, that most people still do not fully understand. Every diplomatic signal said this war would not happen. The talks in Oman were showing progress. Iran had reportedly agreed to give up its enriched uranium. The world believed both sides were stepping back. Then, at 2:30 in the morning, East Coast time, the sky over Tehran turned orange. Donald Trump did not walk to a podium. He posted an 8-minute video on social media and told the world that American bombs were already falling on Iran. The operation had a name. America called it Epic Fury. Israel called it Roaring Lion. Within hours, a man who had ruled Iran for 37 years was dead. And here is the part nobody expected. This was not a reaction to something Iran did. This was a decision made long before that night. Here is exactly what happened and why. To understand February 28th, you have to understand one thing first. This war did not start that morning. It had been building for 47 years. In 1979, Iran had a revolution and became an Islamic republic. From that day, the United States and Iran treated each other as enemies. That hostility never went away. It just changed over the decades. Then October 2023 happened. Hamas attacked Israel. That one event pulled the entire Middle East into a chain of conflicts nobody could stop. Iran was behind Hamas. Iran was behind Hezbollah in Lebanon. Iran was funding the Houthis in Yemen. All of them were hitting Israel and American forces across the region. By 2024, Israel and Iran were exchanging direct missile strikes for the first time ever. In June 2025, they fought a 12-day war. During that war, the United States attacked Iran's nuclear sites at Fordo, Isfahan, and Natanz for the first time in history. The head of the UN nuclear watchdog said Iran's nuclear program had been pushed back by months. In January 2026, Iran's own people rose up in the largest protests since 1979. The government killed thousands of them. In February 2026, nuclear talks in Oman showed real progress. Iran was ready to make a deal. Trump walked away from the table. That one decision is what opened the door to everything that followed. And behind that door, a military operation had already been waiting. While the talks in Oman were still going on, something very large and very quiet was already happening across the Middle East. Weeks before February 28th, the United States was moving military power into the region at a scale not seen since the Iraq invasion of 2003. Almost nobody in the public was paying attention to it. B-2 stealth bombers, aircraft that can carry some of the largest bombs ever built and fly without being seen on radar, were quietly moved to Diego Garcia, the American and British military base in the Indian Ocean, and to RAF Fairford in the United Kingdom. These aircraft were not there for training. U.S. Navy carrier strike groups moved into position across the region. U.S. Central Command, which runs all American military operations in the Middle East, reached a level of readiness that military analysts had not seen in over 2 decades. But here is what made this operation different from anything before it. Israel had been planning its part for months, not weeks, months. Israeli military officials confirmed after the strikes began that the planning process was long and thorough. Chatham House, a British foreign policy research institution, noted that Israeli intelligence had reached far inside Iran's military and political structure. Israeli planners reportedly knew where specific Iranian officials would be at specific times. That kind of intelligence takes a very long time to build. Israel had 50,000 reservists already on active duty before the operation began. In the final days before the strikes, Israel called up 20,000 more. Israeli hospitals quietly moved their operations underground in preparation for what Iran would send back. And then there was one detail about the timing that most people missed. Every previous Israeli strike on Iran had happened at night. Night attacks are standard. The enemy expects them. This time, Israel chose morning. It was on purpose. It was designed to catch Iran off guard at the exact moment the bombs started falling. Both sides were ready. One side just did not know it yet. And when the morning of February 28th arrived, there was no turning back. When February 28th arrived, analysts still thought that if an attack came, it would be small and targeted. A nuclear facility, a missile depot, something limited. Nobody expected what actually happened. The opening attack hit all of Iran at the same time. Explosions were reported at the same time in Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, Karaj, Kermanshah, Tabriz, Shiraz, Bushehr, Zanjan, Urmia, Damavand, Elam, and Loristan province. This was not a strike on a program. This was a strike on an entire country in one single moment. The first target was a compound in Tehran called the Leadership House. This was where Khamenei and senior Iranian security officials had gathered. The strike was precise, it was planned, and it worked. By the following morning, Iranian state media confirmed what the world had already begun to suspect. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, supreme leader of Iran since 1989, the man who had ruled the country for 37 years, was dead. He was not the only one killed. Iran's defense minister Aziz Nasirzadeh was reported dead. ARGC commander Mohammad Pakpour was targeted and likely killed. Army Chief of Staff Abdul Rahim Mousavi was struck. Members of Khamenei's own family were also killed in the same attack, including his daughter, his son-in-law, and his grandchild. The IRGC Malik Ashtar building in Tehran, one of Iran's key military research centers, was completely destroyed. Footage confirmed by Iran International showed this on March 2nd. Iran's parliament building was struck. In the early hours of March 3rd, the headquarters of IRIB, Iran's national broadcaster, was hit. By March 10th, U.S. Central Command confirmed that American forces had struck more than 5,000 targets inside Iran since February 28th. Iran's Red Crescent reported that over 6,668 civilian buildings had been hit by the joint campaign. One specific incident drew international attention. In Mainab, a city in southern Iran, a strike hit an elementary school for girls. Iran's state media reported at least 51 people killed. A local prosecutor gave a number of 148. The New York Times later confirmed the strike had targeted an Iranian naval base sitting directly next to the school. The U.S. military used double-tap strikes in several locations, meaning a second strike follows the first to hit people who came to help. Iran's Red Crescent reported that 11 of its healthcare workers were killed, including 4 doctors and 2 nurses. Iran's representative to the United Nations confirmed that at least 1,348 civilians had been killed inside Iran by this point. Iran's military leadership was largely gone. Its nuclear and missile infrastructure was being taken apart, target by target. The first wave had done what it was built to do. But while the bombs were still falling on Iran, something else was already happening. Iran was not going to stay quiet. On the same day the strikes began, Iran fired back. Missiles and drones started launching from Iranian soil in every direction. The IRGC announced it was going after every American base it could reach across the entire region. By March 5th, a military source speaking to Iran's Fars news agency confirmed that Iran had fired more than 500 ballistic missiles and nearly 2,000 drones since February 28th. About 40% were aimed at Israel. The other 60% were sent toward American military positions spread across multiple countries. The IRGC said it had hit at least 27 bases where U.S. troops were stationed. The countries hit by Iranian strikes included Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Azerbaijan, the Kurdistan region of Iraq, and the British RAF base at Akrotiri in Cyprus. Iran was not just hitting Israel and America. It was going after every country that had allowed American forces to operate from its soil. Dubai International Airport, the busiest international airport in the world by international passenger numbers, was shut down with no set date to reopen. Airports in Israel, Qatar, and the UAE followed. Thousands of flights were canceled or turned around in mid-air. On March 1st, an Iranian ballistic missile hit a synagogue shelter in Beit Shemesh, 18 miles from Jerusalem. 9 civilians were killed inside. 2 Israeli interceptor missiles had been fired at it. Both missed. It was the deadliest single strike inside Israel during the conflict. By the end of the first week, 15 Israelis had been killed and 2,000 wounded. 7 American soldiers were confirmed dead. A U.S. Air Force KC-135 tanker aircraft was shot down over Iraq and crashed. A second tanker was damaged but managed to land in Israel. Iran used cluster munitions in some of its strikes on Israeli residential areas. Amnesty International condemned this directly, noting that cluster bombs are banned by international treaty because they kill civilians and fighters without any difference between the two. But by day 10, Iranian missile launches had dropped by more than 90%. US and Israeli forces had destroyed up to 3/4 of Iran's missile launching capacity. Iran had not run out of the will to fight. It had simply run out of weapons. Iran had struck back as hard as it could. But now, with its military leadership gone and its weapons running low, the country faced a question it had never faced before. Who was in charge now? That question had no easy answer. When Khamenei died in the opening hours of February 28th, Iran lost the one person who had the final say over every major decision the country made for nearly 4 decades. Iran declared 40 days of national mourning. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian went on state media and told the country that the killing of the supreme leader was a declaration of war against all Muslims. He said revenge was Iran's right and its duty. But the reaction inside Iran was not one voice. In some parts of the country, people came into the streets and celebrated when news of Khamenei's death spread. In Tehran, pro-regime crowds gathered to mourn him. The country was split between people who grieved the man who had ruled them and people who had suffered under that rule for decades. The CIA said a hardliner from the IRGC was the most likely person to take power. The IRGC is not just a fighting force. It controls large parts of Iran's economy, its factories, and its intelligence work. An IRGC figure taking power would mean the most hardline people in the country running everything. That is close to what happened. Iran's Assembly of Experts announced that Mojtaba Khamenei, the 56-year-old son of the late Supreme Leader, had been named as the new Supreme Leader of Iran. Trump said the appointment was not acceptable. Researchers at Chatham House warned that the world was now in one of the most dangerous stretches of any conflict. The period between a government losing its structure and something stable taking its place is where the worst outcomes in modern history have happened. And while Iran was trying to sort out who was in charge, the rest of the world was already feeling the weight of what had happened. The weight did not stay in the Middle East. Within days of the strikes beginning, the effects of this war were showing up in the daily lives of people in countries thousands of miles away from Iran. The most immediate hit was on energy. Iran sits beside the Strait of Hormuz. About 20% of the world's oil passes through that narrow strip of water every single day. Iran threatened to close it. Iranian military activity in the area disrupted international shipping so badly that the Wall Street Journal reported that movement through the strait had largely stopped. Oil prices jumped. Companies in Iraq, Kuwait, and Qatar started pulling back production because the region felt too unstable to operate normally. Saudi Arabia's state oil company said it could send some exports through the Red Sea instead, but warned openly that if the war kept going, the damage to the world economy would be severe. The G7 nations sat down to talk about opening emergency oil reserves to bring prices down. They could not agree to act together. Prices dropped slightly when news of the talks got out, then settled back at high levels. IMF Chief Kristalina Georgieva put a number on the risk. Every 10% rise in energy prices across 2026 would push global inflation up by nearly 0.5 percentage point. For countries where people were already struggling to pay for food and fuel, that was not a small number. The effects were already showing up in people's daily lives. Bangladesh shut its universities early for summer to cut energy costs. Pakistan moved to a 4-day working week. The Philippines did the same. The human cost was being counted in numbers that are hard to sit with. Iran's UN representative confirmed at least 1,348 civilians killed inside Iran. 15 Israelis were dead. 7 American soldiers confirmed killed. 17 civilians dead across Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE, and Jordan from Iranian strikes. In Lebanon, where Israel had also resumed military operations, 687 people were killed, among them 98 children. 3 Indian nationals were killed in the Strait of Hormuz. A Chinese national died inside Iran. A Filipino national was killed in Israel. Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Nepali, and Japanese nationals were among those who lost their lives. These were people from countries that had no part in starting this war. In Karachi, Pakistan, protests against the United States turned violent. At least 9 protesters were killed as crowds tried to push into the U.S. consulate. Inside, Iran basic goods were running out. In northern Tehran, supermarkets ran out of bread, eggs, bottled water, and milk within days of the strike's beginning. Long lines formed at fuel stations across the country. The bombs did not just hit military buildings, they hit the daily lives of millions of ordinary people. And as those people suffered, every government in the world had to decide where it stood. Every country watching this conflict had to pick a position. Stand with the United States and Israel. Stand with Iran. Or say nothing and hope the consequences did not reach them. The United Kingdom did not join the military operation. But Prime Minister Keir Starmer allowed American bombers to use British bases at Diego Garcia and RAF Fairford, calling the purpose specific, limited, and for protection. The British government published legal advice to back that decision. But the RAF base at Akrotiri in Cyprus was later hit by an Iranian drone in March 2026, pulling Britain into the consequences of the war, even without officially being part of it. Starmer condemned the Iranian strikes but said publicly that he did not believe bombing a country produces a stable government. France and Germany joined Starmer in a statement condemning Iranian strikes on Gulf countries. They called for a return to talks and laid out 4 conditions. Iran must stop its nuclear program, stop building ballistic missiles, stop sending money and weapons to armed groups in other countries, and stop killing its own people. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney backed the U.S. action, saying preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon was worth supporting. The European Union called on all sides to protect civilians and pull back from further military action. EU officials said sanctions were already in place and that talking remained the only responsible way forward. Russia took the opposite side. President Vladimir Putin called the killing of Khamenei cold-blooded murder. Russia formally asked for an emergency session of the International Atomic Energy Agency's Board of Governors in Vienna. That session was held. Saudi Arabia condemned Iranian strikes on its Gulf neighbors and called on the world to treat them as attacks on national sovereignty that could not go without a response. Every country had spoken. But when you put all those positions together, one bigger question came into focus. What is this war actually about? Because this war is not really about Iran's nuclear program. And it is not really about Gaza. It is about who gets to shape the direction of the Middle East for the next 30 years. And the answer to that question is still not settled. Trump described the operation as the result of 47 years of conflict with Iran that had never been properly resolved. He said, Iran's backing of armed groups, its threats against American soldiers, its push toward a nuclear weapon, and its killing of its own citizens had made this confrontation unavoidable. Operation Epic Fury had 3 stated goals: destroy Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs, take out Iran's navy, and bring down the Iranian government. But analysts at the Council on Foreign Relations said the risk of this war stretching into something much longer and far more costly was real. They pointed to Iraq in 2003 as the clearest warning. The U.S. removed that government in weeks. It spent nearly 20 years dealing with what was left behind. Chatham House put it plainly. Airstrikes can take out buildings and kill leaders. They cannot put a working government in place or give a country a stable future. The most dangerous stretch of any conflict is not the fighting itself. It is the time after the fighting stops when a country has no clear leadership and no clear road ahead. Iran's institutions run deep. Its beliefs run through every layer of government. Its allied forces across Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Syria remained active. The military question may have an answer. The political question does not yet. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a joint attack on Iran and killed its leader. The stated reason was nuclear security and stability in the region. What actually comes out of it is still being worked out day by day. There is no ceasefire today. There is no peace agreement. Iran has a new supreme leader that the United States has already said it will not accept. The Strait of Hormuz is still a pressure point for the world's energy supply. The human cost keeps going up, And millions of people in Iran, in Israel, across the Gulf, and in countries far from the fighting are carrying consequences they had no hand in creating. This is one of the biggest conflicts of this century, and it is still going. If this gave you a clearer picture of what is actually happening, subscribe to this channel, share this with someone who needs to understand it, and follow for updates as this continues to develop. This story is still moving.